And I think we're up, maybe.
I'll double check here as I've got a couple things online. We do have a little different look here, folks. We had a little technical difficulties getting started. Brendan is hosting a murder mystery. That's apparently what it is. The murder mystery was not apparently what happened with the Coyotes today, contrary to popular opinion. There was no mystery, really, what happened with that one. Yet we are online. This is not the B Team podcast. We had a little trouble getting going, but welcome to the Jackrabbit post-game show. I'm Zach Borg with Dakota News Now, joined by Alex Kinkle, filling in for Brendan tonight. Hopefully my microphone's okay. I'm sometimes get a little bit of feedback on this thing a lot of time. I would say everything was, outside of the first quarter, everything was okay with South Dakota State today. As they, I don't know the full history of the 115 or 116 games they played with USD, but that's got to go to, if that was the biggest game in the history of the series, which by every number and metric it pretty much was, that'll probably go down as one of the most impressive performances that either team has ever had in the rivalry. South Dakota State just wallops them 37-3, 37 unanswered points after trailing 3-0 in a quarter. And the Jackrabbits, I don't know what that was impressive. I no disrespect to South Dakota, I don't or the Jacks. I don't know that I saw them. Every game in the D1 era has been close going to the fourth quarter, but I guess we maybe shouldn't be surprised that this team that has kind of slayed every dragon or demon did it again.
Yeah, you heard the guys talk about it all week. Coach Rogers' radio show, everything, he's fired up. I think that's just very emblematic of this program and where this team is right now, is they are kind of no holds barred, no quarter, no prisoner. You're going to get our best shot week in, week out here. So, obviously as a Jacks fan, that's what I like to see. Can't speak for the rest of the Valley on that one, but.
Well, it was just kind of it was especially the way the game started. The early on, such an uncharacteristic start, especially the last few weeks. They've been getting off to very good starts in these games. You wouldn't have known that which team was the one that had been in these kind of games before. Obviously, USD comes out, has a pretty good opening drive, kicks a 50-yard field goal. Thanks, Corey. Kicks a 50-yard field goal, would have been good from 60. A good job by SDSU, though, to hold them after they'd gotten down to about the 26, and it turned out to be a pretty good challenge by Jimmy Rogers. They of a backward lateral that dropped him back 7 more yards, so it took a 43-yarder to a 50. Kid makes it anyway. Then there's kind of a bad kickoff return by Amar Johnson. 2 false start penalties due to crowd noise. 3 and out. Another kind of and then there was an interception in that quarter as well. There was a bad kick, kind of a bad punt return that pinned him back at the 6. Everything that could go wrong in that first did, but the defense didn't really let USD get much beyond the field goal. And then they go on that marathon 94-yard drive that I think after that happened, everybody kind of knew, okay, that USC might be in for a tough time if they don't do something right away after that drive. And sure enough, I think they went 3 and out right away. And that it almost felt like ball game at that point. I hate to say it felt like ball game at 7-3. But when you give up a 14-play, 94-yard drive, and then you have to put your defense right back on the field, you're in trouble.
I wouldn't say it felt like a ball game at that point necessarily, but it definitely felt like that was the real start to the game. I don't know if the guys were just jitters, pressing, whatever, start there offensively, but obviously they settled in, and it was on from there. Other than kind of the one like Seth talked about, the kind of one misfire Gronowski had. Which is, I think he's just trying to make a play there.
You can make an argument this was one of their – the numbers offensively are not going to end up being that impressive for some – Gronowski 13 of 19, 207 yards. I mean, good efficiency, but
Right.
the one pick, didn't throw a touchdown. First time in a while, Isaiah Davis hasn't gone over 100 yards, 17 carries, 69 yards. Nice, though. We can agree on that. He didn't really – he had a couple of nice first down runs where he kind of kept the feed kind of – Amar Johnson, I made this remark during my newscast, and I've got to post the highlights up here pretty soon, but every time we kind of run into one of these big games, whether it's North Dakota State or whoever, we always talk about Isaiah, but here comes Amar always shows up pretty big in these games as well. He had the 2 20-yard touchdown runs, but 8 carries, 66 yards. Angel Johnson, I thought, looked really good, even though we didn't really see him as much. We saw him more toward the end of the game, but man, I want to see more of him, quite frankly, but I don't know how you get him the carries when this team's on. It just, it wasn't like it was the most impressive offensive performance, but they just, it was kind of a death by a thousand. What's that saying? Death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Paper cuts. Yep.
Yeah. And with that, and as many of you guys know who are online, my dad was at this game, and he's never seen either of these teams play before. So the true unbiased observer who's watching the first time, and his comment to me kept like, they look like an NFL line. They're that big and they're that physical for SDSU. And I'm like, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I've been to a few NFL games, but for an FCS team, this is as close as you're going to get to an NFL style of line, especially with Garrett. I know he was really impressed with Garrett Greenfield, who isn't. It's just when they got cranking, there was no stop. It was going to be tough to stop them, I think, for USD. And I think the Coyotes, to be fair, they had some chances. They had like 4 really brutal drops that could have maybe – but I don't know if the Coyotes, if they make those plays, maybe it turns a 37-3 game into 30-17. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that makes a huge difference. The one Bell had, I don't know if they even record drops in NCAA or if that will go down as one or not, but I wouldn't count it. I would say more. Obviously, I'm a little biased there, but I would say more. That was a great play by Beenum to kind of get his hand in there right before the ball got there and change the trajectory. I wanted to circle back to one thing you said here, Zach, about Gronowski and Davis. Talked about kind of their ho-hum stats. Neither of those guys scored today. And that, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I do know that breaks pretty lengthy streaks for both those guys. Both those guys had scored in, tons of consecutive games, and neither of them got in the end zone today.
I mean, it would have to be probably the first time since the Iowa game last year, or at least one of them didn't score.
Well, and that's probably where it goes back to for almost both of them, I want to say, because that was the last time Jacks obviously didn't score a touchdown at all.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Jordan, you're right. That long, that to me, that was a big boy drive, and it was, I've got the box score here as I'm looking at it now, and remember it started at this 94-yard drive. It started at the 6-yard line, and it kind of started with another kind of a misplay. I think it was Tucker Large, and again they kind of had some struggles in special teams that first quarter. They had the Amar Johnson after the USD kicks the field goal. Probably shouldn't have taken the ball out. I know he's a great runner, a great return man, but he probably should have just taken the knee and taken it at the 25, and he got popped around the 15, and then that drive stalled. But I think Tucker probably should have maybe called for a fair catch. He got a little lucky. He was able to haul the ball in, but he got tackled at the 6, and it just was, the drive – there was a controversial play I do want to get to because everybody, it's the rule I hate more than any. It's the targeting, and we saw it on both sides because they nearly threw Adam Bach out of the game, which I didn't think. And luckily they reversed it if you're an SDSU fan, but I'm not a big fan of targeting anyway. But that drive right away, they were backed up at their own 7, and Isaiah Davis gets an 8-yard run to get you out of trouble right away, and it was just. That's a masterpiece. If you're the offensive, if you gave a game ball in theory, would you give it to the offensive line today?
I would. I think the 605 Hogs are the all-star here. I was looking at some of the box score stuff, and I've got it pulled up here. So, you didn't have a single guy over 70. Davis was the leader with 69, but you had, once again, nice. But you had 6 guys combined for 200 over 200 yards. I mean, that's just emblematic of the 605 Hogs really imposing their will, especially in the back half of this one.
Yeah, I realized we're in a dome, but it was kind of 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Right.
Was that 3 yards in a cloud of those little black
Rubber
turf
pellets.
things. Yeah, those rubber pellet things or whatever the heck. It's better than the old AstroTurf they used to have at domes and whatnot. Yeah, the controversial play was obviously the targeting on Barrios or Barros. I think is his name. I've called him Barrios. That was huge because he had that pick on Gronowski, and he's one of their better cover cornerbacks. And of course, later in the game, they hit the 52-yard bomb to Jackson Yonke that set up a field goal in the first half. You got to credit Rodgers a little bit because he had that review that set them back farther on the 50-yard field goal, and then they reviewed for. I don't know if Rodgers called for that or if the refs called for that review. Maybe that's a referee call.
I'll circle back to that quick. I want to pull up what Jordan said here about the Barros targeting. I kind of agree. I'm not sure if you're familiar with my background, Zach, but I'm a high school official, so I have a little bit. I don't want to act like obviously I don't know the college rules as well, but I have a little bit of an eye, I like to think, and exactly what Jordan said is true. I know I just listened to Nielsen's press conference before we got on here. I know Bob did not like it at all, but by the letter of the law, that was targeting. I think I don't know why NCAA has to be different for both high school and NFL. It's not an automatic ejection unless it's flagrant, unless you get the Vontez Burfict, Antonio Brown type deal there. And obviously Barros was trying to make a play. He was not trying to hurt Amar Johnson. By letter of the law, it was probably targeting, but I don't think we need to be tossing kids out for that. That's just my opinion there.
Did they think it was helmet to helmet? Because I thought he led shoulder. I just thought he led shoulder, and I didn't even.
The replay I saw, and I haven't watched it back since I watched live, but the replay I saw, he led with the crown, and so that's one of the main criteria there.
I slowed it down in my highlights, and I didn't really think. I thought he went to the side. I don't know. I don't know. Best Buy. Yeah, no, I did slow it down in my highlights. I didn't say one way or the other what I thought it was. I don't know. It was an interesting call to hear them make, and they didn't initially. And the fact of it was, they didn't initially call it on the field.
It came from the replay official.
That was surprising to me because usually you don't usually see it called like that. Usually it's the way it was with the Bach penalty, which I thought was not again, I don't know.
Well, it was clearly a glancing blow. I mean, the Bach call, you see something at speed, and that's part of why that's an automatic review in college, especially like we talked about, the extra weight of the ejection. It just has to be at that point.
Right, and, the spirit of the rule is good. I agree. But what they say about the road to hell being paved with good intentions. And you're especially right with the college game that they're throwing people out for a game. For them to lose one of their best cornerbacks against a team that has 2 of the top receivers in the Valley, it is what it is. Especially when it's not, like you said, it's not a guy doing Vontez Burfict. It's not somebody who's headhunting. Does it make a huge difference? Again, I'm not saying this makes a difference in USD. It significantly impacts the game. But, and it would have been worse is if it happens in the fourth quarter, because then he would have been kicked out for the SIU game.
And that's going to be a big game for those guys next week.
Absolutely.
That's going to be huge. They went out. They're still probably, and especially with, what happened in Moscow today, they're probably a 5 to 8 seed easily if they win out still. So their whole season.
I don't think he has to sit in the first half. I see Jim's popping saying he's
no.
I think because it happened.
In the first half, he's good. Yeah. So if it happens in the second half, that's when you have to sit the first half of the next game.
Yeah, so I think that was fortunate for him. If it happened in the second half, he would have been in trouble. But and I didn't hear obviously I didn't hear the announcers on Midcoast saying they needed to establish the run game. I think one thing I kind of thought. One thing I thought going into this game, I'm not saying I was shocked that USD got their doors blown off. I don't think that was necessarily the part, because with with this SDSU team, it's veering toward this being the greatest team in program history. I think they still have to finish the job.
Absolutely.
Before you can say that. But, obviously we still have to give the team they're playing next week the credit of, well, USD goes up to Fargo, beats NDSU wire to wire. Wasn't a fluke. Physically, they lined up with them. They didn't get pushed off the ball. So you're thinking, okay, even if NDSU is down a little bit, isn't typical NDSU, at least if they match up with the Bison, they're not going to get completely blown away off the ball. And boy, that was not the case after the first quarter. I think USD held up for about one quarter. They gave Bauman some time. But as the game wore along, you can kind of see it. Just SD, and we know this to be true, especially on the defensive lines, with the way they it's like in a hockey line change with those defensive linemen, just one after the other. I've said this a lot. Of course, I get the portion of SDSU fans who are saying, "Oh, USD sucked. I told you so." I've never been a fan of that kind of thinking, because it's like, okay, when you say the other team's overrated, then you're kind of diminishing what your team just did. I just think, this SDSU team is in that different of a category that they just took what's probably a good team. I don't know if they're really top 10-ish, but they just took apart a pretty good football team that had good lines, and it does not bode well for North. You can't take anything for granted. It does not bode well for the Bison that they couldn't move that team off the line, and the team they're going to play next week in Brookings just took them apart basically after one quarter.
Yeah, I know. If we want to look ahead to next week a little bit, I think that's exactly right. Obviously it's the marker. So when, kind of like we talked about, this game always kind of tends to be close. The markers the same way. I mean, there hasn't been a blowout since early 10s. I'd have to go look through the game by game results, but
I would kind of say the 2015 game that was at that I think that was 28-7, and I think SDSU got a late Goddard touchdown. That was the last Carson Wentz game, and they weren't really in that one, as I remember. I mean, it's kind of at the hybrid.
In the hybrid.
The hybrid stage of Coughlin and Dana. And that was actually Lujan's last game as the starter, because the next week, Taron Christian was inserted as the true freshman.
Yep, I do remember that now. I thought that game was close for some reason. That was towards the end of my tenure as a student, or right in the middle. I don't know. It all runs together after a while, obviously. That game was weird. Not to get sidetracked on that road, but Wentz played horrible, and because we turned the ball over so many times, they still won easily.
That was just a period where SDSU did not. I mean, even 2 years earlier, they had hosted that game at Coughlin Alumni. I think they only scored 3 points. I mean, it was right. That was the period where NDSU clearly had the advantage up front and with the linemen, and just was at a. Although it was, the year before that 2015 game was when SDSU almost had them beat in the playoffs. So
and speaking of, Seth brings up here, I had forgot about that. I was trying to talk strictly marker games, so we didn't have to talk about that game, Seth.
And I was at the semifinal too. But that's the semifinal, like you said, the semifinal was close at half. That I was there for that. Remember, they were down 7, and but it was but that was kind of the same thing that happened at James Madison the year before,
right?
Along with all the turnovers they were committing, they were still in the game at half at Madison, and then the other team kind of physically. But in 2018, NDSU was another turning point, because you kind of got this feeling that, okay, they need to stop.
Another step to go here.
They need to get physically more. They need to get better and deeper in the trenches, because they're physically getting blown out of these games in the second half and getting worn down. I know Stig did not admit it in that time, because I don't think he wanted to give that to.
Right.
But you knew. And then the next year, even though they lost the game day marker game, that's when you saw the real difference with South Dakota State, that even though they lost that game, they weren't getting pushed around. They weren't getting worn down in the second half. really the only reasons they lost that game was they lost their starting quarterback, and they were down to they still nearly beat him with a third string who hadn't played the whole season. So, yeah, I mean, looking at the NDSU game, I mean, we knew that was going to be a layup. They were playing Murray State. They got out 21-0. I'm seeing some stuff about injuries here.
So I didn't watch it myself. Matt, the Podfather, watched it, and he was sending some stuff to the group chat. I decided to tune into Montana State, Idaho instead, which was a fantastic game. If you guys got to see any of that, I'd encourage everyone to go back and watch that. But I won't speculate on what Mostart's injury is, Corey. But yeah, Eli Mostart did leave the game in late. I don't know. Entz was trying to prove a point or what. I'm not going to dogpile on Entz. He's a way better coach than I will ever be, obviously, and the guys won a national title, but they left their starters in really late, which leads us to, I did see your comment earlier, Sean. I just didn't put it up. I'll put it up now. So their safety opposite Cole Wisniewski, Sam Jung, targeting once again after the game was well in hand, starter still playing, so he will be sitting first half next week too. Just very odd they left their starters in that long, especially when you're up 30 on Murray State in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I was a little busy with the game that mattered in the FCS in the Missouri Valley. I guess the last little note I'll have, people are asking, will the marker matter? I get that the marker became the bigger of the two. Would I personally rather all the glory be within the South Dakota borders and we not have to share with the interesting folks up north? And that's my nice phrase for Bison fans. Yes, I would love it if this became the top 10 matchup every year, maybe with a little more drama involved. Although I'm sure Jackrabbit fans would love it like this every week. But I mean, the Mostart thing, I don't know how you. I mean, we've heard a lot about him, but he's been injured so much the last couple of years anyway. How much of a factor is he at this point? I mean, is he when he's quote unquote healthy?
Are you talking Mostart here?
Yeah, I mean, he's been kind of. I mean, they've both those boys have dealt with so many injuries, and frankly, when you watch their last real road game, I think the other one was what. Their last two home games were Western Illinois and
Murray this week.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we saw them in a challenging road game was UND,
right?
And they were getting run on up the middle by the Fighting Hawks,
who struggled with the trees today.
With those guys. Yeah, I mean, I'm just telling you, it's like if they were giving up big runs to the Fighting Hawks with those guys that were just basically simple run plays up the middle, I'm not sure how much of an impact those. Again, you can't overlook, and that's a funny thing. I know these haven't been posted yet, and I do want to. I'm hoping we'll get the full press conferences posted here to dakotanewsnow.com soon. But there was kind of a funny comment that Jaden Yankee said something to the effect of, "We're not going to overlook NDSU," which is something I don't think I've ever heard in about 15 years around these markets. But you don't, again, you can't overlook NDSU, knowing that. But man, I just think the Bison have a lot of. This is just not the same Bison football team, but they're going to throw the kitchen sink in whatever they have out there for this game because they have to. And they have to be sick of the losing streak.
It's just that they're down, obviously. But when you're NDSU, what does down really mean? If they're down, there's some teams that would still kill to be, where they're at, top 10, top 15 bubble, could maybe play themselves into a seed yet. And yeah, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought and I remember where I was going. One's a, old cliche, but one's a wild animal, the most dangerous when it's cornered. They know that for the first time in a long time, they're going to be playing on Thanksgiving weekend if they do not win this game Saturday. And they have all the risk in this one. I mean, SDSU could drop this one, and at this point, once again, after what happened in Moscow today, they're probably still the one seed if they drop this one and win their next game. I mean,
there's an argument for
Furman, sure.
There's an argument for Furman, but yeah, I mean, it's the same thing I've gotten into with the fans who are saying, "Oh, USD is not a top 10 seed." Well, who outside of SDSU and before today Montana State, although I still kind of, I guess maybe now I'll throw Idaho back
and
in
maybe
that discussion.
Montana.
And maybe I mean, obviously you have to kind of, but again, I think if it's any team outside of the Valley or the Big Sky, who can you put out there and say, oh, this team has an ironclad resume. They are a top 10.
Right.
It's SDSU and right now everybody else. So when now if USD goes out and lays an egg next week at Southern Illinois, sure, they're not a top 10 team. But if they, right now it's everybody else is just it's not the rest of the FCS is pretty average right now. And for NDSU, what's the JSD?
So that started. I'm surprised you haven't seen that yet. That started on somewhere else on our Fans Nation network. Joe DeLeon and Sean Anderson of Hack City, when they were doing one of their poll reveal shows. I don't know if you ever listen to those guys. They're good entertainment. They're going on one of their rants, and Sean's talking about because he'd seen some stuff where people were calling them the U and the U of. He's like, no, that's dumb. You're just South Dakota. Just South Dakota. You should change your name to JSD. And so obviously SDSU fans jumped right on that and co-opted it. So that's where that comes from.
Well, apparently there's San Diego State, according to ESPN, because that to me is still the biggest mind-blowing thing of the week. That to me is more shocking than SDSU, the final score today. I mean, I'm not, like they finally got South Dakota State video in the South Dakota State thing.
Right.
And they put you literally have San Diego State and South Dakota State video opposite of each other. Like, I mean, I guess if I were the University of San Diego, I'd be a little pissed off right now because apparently they don't have any video of the Toreros, who are a non-scholarship Pioneer League team. That's where Jim Harbaugh started coaching at. It's like
they got bigger problems right now.
Yeah, can't you get one video from him? They gave up a Hail Mary. Funny thing was, actually, last week they lost on a Hail Mary to Drake since we, apparently that's a thing for, apparently there's always going to be a Hail Mary related with a USD team one way or the other, although not so much now with the one here. But yeah, no, it's, I don't know what the Bison, I mean, I'm looking at their numbers now, and this game is a little, again, they're playing Murray State. It's a layup. I don't know why their starters were in if they were in that long. Their leading rusher today was Cam Miller for 55 yards. But the thing I've heard in looking at some of their things is, where are the playmakers for NDSU?
Well, that's just it. They haven't had a running back lead rushing, but maybe once or maybe twice this year. I know you go into some of the Bison pages and groups and stuff, and that's a big point of contention right now is Cam Miller and Cole Payton are kind of the running backs for that team right now.
Yeah, I mean, Tamarick Williams, I thought when I saw him last year, I thought he was decent, but he doesn't really seem to have.
Again, and TK Marshall as well. He's been kind of, I hate to use that word and end up on a hype video, but he's had probably not the season he would hope.
They only had 4 carries and 16 yards today.
Right.
So he's not. I mean, the one I've heard that they really want to get involved, that they keep talking, this guy, I'm probably not pronouncing his name right, Barika Pinu. I think he's a local Fargo. So maybe that's part of it too. He's a local Fargo guy. They're rooting for their guy a little more. But like, he seems to have a little bit of explosiveness. But the interesting thing I've heard from the Fargo media, which I don't necessarily buy into, is that a lot of the younger guys are getting held back because they have so many 6-year COVID guys. Like Cam Miller's already said he's coming back.
Next year. Yep.
But my problem with that is, okay, it's not really affecting SDSU though. Like, here's the SDSU team that has a lot of guys who took that extra COVID year or have an extra year. Griffin Wilde's probably not getting as many balls thrown at him, but I don't really see it like he's still making contributions. Maybe Angel Johnson's not getting as much, but it's like, I don't think it's so much an issue of the fact that, the younger guys are getting held back or that the old, I don't buy that idea that the COVID years older guys are holding your younger guys back. Maybe they're just not developing at the rate you want them to. That to me, when you have an older team, you should be in a fairly good place. And like I said, there's a lot of things going on at NDSU right now that I think are just kind of you wonder if maybe it just was a matter of time before things started to kind of. And again, this is also the period now too where Entz is starting to, there's less and less. I don't know if there are any climbing guys left anymore. Now these are his guys. If they're going to start to.
That's been a big talking point up there. Obviously, this is Entz's full true. Every guy on the team is Entz's guy, but I want to say it was Matt Frazee of Fans Nation who pointed it out on Twitter the other day, kind of putting that to bed a little bit. They had more Entz recruits as starters and just guys from portal, whatever else. They had more Entz recruits on the 2021 title team than they did on the runner-up team last year, which was kind of interesting to note.
That was a big, big point. And to Jim's point as well, Rogers going for the points at half.
Well, that's
absolutely
huge. That set the tone. We're going to be aggressive. We're not taking our foot off the gas here.
And why not too? I mean, they had 2 timeouts. I mean, heck, I was almost at the point where I'm like, might as well throw a bomb and see if you can get a touchdown out of that. But and even another thing too, big confidence boost for Dustman. A few weeks ago, he had that kind of that rough game. I can't remember who it was against. He had a rough game a few weeks ago. He hits that hit a big field goal at Southern Illinois that kind of put the thing away. 49-yarder that he drills. He had another field goal that looked really good toward the end of this game that kind of looked like it was going to tail out, and then it came right back in. I mean, he had some long. Again, I realize it's Dakota Dome, no elements, but anything beyond 45 for a college kicker, I don't care where you're at. That's not a gimme when you're in college.
No.
So heck, if you can say there was one thing I was impressed with both teams it was the kicking games, because those guys both hit bombs that were pretty impressive for the fact neither one of them have really attempted anything that long before. Again, granted, we're indoors, but and I will say this too: you can maybe see a difference between what a Jimmy Rogers SDSU USD game looks like as opposed to a Stig.
Right.
I think the reviews, some of the target. It seemed like there was some gamesmanship, because I know Nielsen had a review not long after the Barros one. There seemed to be some gamesmanship going on with some of the reviews between the coaches. So, I'm curious, because I did try to ask Jimmy about this, and I didn't get a chance to ask him at the presser because I was at the weekly press conference, because I had a thing with my son. I had to take him to an appointment. But it's easy to forget, Jimmy never played in this rivalry series. It happened during the transition when they were not playing each other. So I always kind of wondered, well, how does a guy? I mean, obviously NDSU filled that void for him, I'm sure, and they helped build it into what it became. But I always kind of wondered, well, how does the guy who never played in it feel about it? He heard all the stories from Stig. Stig still treated it pretty much the same. He's been here for a lot of the D1 games, and it may not be the same as it was, but I mean, a lot of the games ever since since 2015, a lot of the games have been pretty close. Been a lot of one-score games. We know what happened in 21. I mean, it's different, but it's becoming it's certainly when the games are close and have more on the line. I'm just wondering, like, how does he feel about it truly? And I think we're starting to see that he may never have played in it, but I think he understands kind of what it means to be in this game and what it means to the people on his side when he's like you said, when he shows that aggression. I think there was a little different pep in their step than even Southern Illinois a week ago. I don't know if they'll admit that, but there was just some different stuff in him, and I'm assuming we'll see a heck of a lot more of that too next week when it's the one that he's always known as the rival that he played against in his playing days.
Yeah, I can't disclose my sources or exactly what was told to me, but I can tell you Jimmy takes the USD rivalry very seriously, and I will leave it at that.
I do wonder if I wonder if there's a part of him that does regret not playing in the game. I mean,
Oh, I would. I mean, it's part of the program history, and other than maybe Stig himself, I don't know if there's a guy out there that bleeds yellow and blue like Jimmy Rogers right now.
so I mean, vicarious. I mean, again, I don't think he'll ever admit it publicly. Vicariously, he has to be kind of living a little bit, especially when this was. Again, I don't think we were. I mean, again, we're accused of hyping it up, but there's no secret that in the Division II era, these were not great programs. I mean, obviously the North Dakota programs were at this level, but other than when USD was good in the 80s, these weren't national. These weren't consistently top 15, 20. And D2 was very different and still is because it's very regionalized. I mean, if you lose 3 games, you're not going to make the D2 playoffs. Augustana is still dealing with that now. So it was a lot tougher to gain kind of a foothold and be successful. But, yeah, I think for a guy who never played in it, I think you kind of saw a little bit today of how much he probably really does still bleed the rivalry. Like I said, for him, I'm sure NDSU is still the bigger one because he played in that, and he's obviously we know that's had the bigger. But like I said, if this became the one where they were playing top 10 games every year, and the games got and the games assuming the games aren't 37-3 every time, then it could switch. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing them start playing for that little brown jug thing or whatever they used to have. I'm all for the more traveling trophies you can have, and apparently Stig had it somewhere. Maybe he keeps it now as a retirement gift. I don't know.
So it's literally message board rumors, so only take it as that. But that's what I've read is Stig tried to bring it back, and he was told by both ADs of both schools they couldn't do it because the corporate sponsors didn't like it, and they thought it took away from their name being on the game, which is horrible if that's the case, because I think we should bring it back. And once again, that's strictly message board rumors. There's no fact or whatever. That's just people on message boards.
I hope that's rumor, because if that's true, that's the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my. Well, because I mean, I think I'd heard there were some things. I thought maybe there was like a Native American trophy. I mean, we know
You're
that
confusing the Sitting Bull trophy with USD and UND. That was retired because that was. We don't need to get into that. That's opening a bad can of worms because that should have been retired. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah, I'm not a very political person, but that was not an appropriate trophy if you know the history of why they chose it in Sitting Bull's resting place. I'll just leave it there.
No, I don't know the history, but there's a colleague of mine who said, you know what, if you ask yourself a question, and if there's any part of you that says no, you probably shouldn't do it.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, little jug. I mean, come on, it's a jug. How do you?
Well, and it was, Roy C. Davis, who was a World War I hero and owned the general store in Vermilion, donated it because after the rivalry had been played for 20, 30 years, they wanted a trophy, and said, I mean, I don't know how it gets more okay than that. The guy was literally a South Dakota World War I hero from Vermilion.
And then, there's my alma mater, CSU, when we play Wyoming, it's the bronze boot, which was worn by a Vietnam War veteran. I mean, come on. I mean, even with the sponsorship thing, Iowa and Iowa State, they play in that Cyhawk series, which is basically what South Dakota is. This interstate rival, which I don't really pay all that much attention to. I'm sorry. It's great that they have this thing where they count these points standings. That's wonderful. I don't really care all that much. I'm sure they do some great things. I know they do some great things for feeding South Dakota. I'm not discounting that, but from the athletic standpoint, I'm more, you pay attention to it's just, the only thing you really would pay attention for a traveling trophy is football. So, I just but they still have a Cyhawk trophy for football, even though they have Iowa Corn sponsoring. Now, I remember they tried a really horrible redesign of that trophy, which it did infamously last 1 year, and then it was sidelined. It was they called it the Pewter family. Google it, folks. We had some love. I worked in Des Moines that year, and it was they tried to have it as this family. It was like this Pewter family around a thing of corn. They were giving corn away.
I remember that now. Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, and then so that was pretty much killed instantly, and then they redesigned the old trophy looked like basically a bowling alley thing, but the new one is all right. But yeah, I mean, either way, the point is they have a sponsor for Iowa and Iowa State, which is a Big 12 and a Big 10 school. You're telling me we can't do that for FCS
both.
Missouri Valley football? Come on.
And like I said, it's strictly conjecture.
Well, in any case, I will say bring back the jug, assuming it's not Stig's retirement gift or, him and Joe Glenn. Or him and Joe Glenn aren't, well, I guess Joe never won it. That is the one thing, because I was doing that whole, and I'll probably keep doing that. I'll probably do a marker memories thing this week, and I'll probably refresh the State U memories thing in the years to come if I'm still, assuming I'm still working. But it's one thing I do kind of miss. I will miss having Stig, and no disrespect to Jimmy, no disrespect to Nielsen. It did remind me how much I missed having Stig go against Joe Glenn, because they're just two old school characters who don't treat football like it's the end all be all. They're not, I think they were at one time a little more intense when they were younger, but they were older guys who are nearing the end of their careers, and you could tell they're like, okay, we've done this a time or two. We see that we don't have to treat this like it's life or death. And they were just funny guys to talk to, funny guys to be around. How much they actually influence they had over the program or ran it day to day, I don't really know. I think they were both figureheads to an extent, although I know Stig still had a lot of influence on a lot of things, but I miss those characters because they just made game days so much fun, and just the practice, and it's, I think over time Jimmy will kind of loosen up a little bit, but when that's kind of natural when you're young and this is everything, and the statement is the standard. It's these are things that Stig's had a lifetime of perspective now, and but yeah, I miss those guys. They were rascals. And there was always a lot of mutual respect too. Like anytime we talk about the rivalry between them, the last time they played, Stig was like, I think his first comments were like, man, I feel kind of bad for Joe because his team played hard. I think he probably knew Glenn was going to retire at the end of the season. There was a lot of mutual respect for those two, and you don't necessarily get that a lot now from people, because obviously it's just a different business and a different world. But there's just, you won't see coaches like John Stiegelmeier and Joe Glenn in the industry, I think, very, very much moving forward. But yeah, I was gonna say. By the way, was there an actual rabbit thrown on the field? I heard that was a thing.
I saw that on Twitter. They didn't show it on the broadcast, but there was, in fact, a dead rabbit on the field. Yeah, we shouldn't do that. One of the usual hosts of this program may have had a flag stolen and burned in years past, and I'm not going to act like we're inculpable either. So, yeah, we should all be adults.
The rivalry really is returning to its D2 roots if we're throwing the rabbit. Maybe we're going to see a dead coyote chucked out on Dana J next year. I don't know. I mean, maybe this thing is starting to regain its old momentum. I don't know.
The blur didn't work today, Jesse, so we're jumping the shark. That was going to be the big reveal for Scared Money Don't Make Money Wednesday, but surprise for everyone that's watching this on the video version. You get to see the unblurred background half a week early.
I was surprised we didn't get a comment about how this background looks so much better than whatever Dakota Dome background he probably originally had programmed in here.
Oh, I don't know.
Usually it's the state. Usually he has the stadium of wherever the game is at.
Sure.
And we know how many Jackrabbit fans have just always thought about what a lovely venue the Dakota Dome is.
I'm not saying this to be an SDSU fan or whatever, but the last time it was down there, I went. That's partially why we weren't there today. We had a diaper keg for our seconds coming in February here, as most people know.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But when my wife was pregnant with our daughter 2 years ago and we went down there, the smell in there actually made her sick. She had to go sit out in the basketball gym because it just smelled like sweaty gym in there for like the entire game.
Well, you might have been. I wonder if you were near where the pool is too. Now,
Probably.
I will say it was a little better in there. Again, the renovation I think has made a big difference. It has never smelled a dead. No, I've never smelled one, but I'm sure it's not pleasant. I've run over enough skunks, but a dead rabbit probably doesn't smell much better. Dead anything doesn't really smell good. The renovation has made a difference. I mean, I wish they could do the other side. Not like if they could do the other side.
Right.
That's what I'm wondering if they. I'm wondering if they want to do that or if they've run out of money. I don't know. Obviously, David Herbster's not the AD anymore, so I don't know what the plan was moving forward. If they could renovate the other side, make certainly get a better press box setups, more suites, I think it would make a big difference. But they may not be going for that. I mean, the other side's really nice, and I've been underneath where they have the locker rooms. That we can make. I know SDSU fans will make fun of it, but it is really. They have a really nice locker room, really nice lounge. They have good amenities on that side. Do they need to do work on the other side? Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure the fact that they get a kick out of the fact that the old locker rooms they used to have, which I don't think are that good, are now the visitor locker rooms. So I'm sure they don't mind putting SDSU in a locker room that's probably not as well maintained as it used to be. But, or as I've said, they should just paint the thing pink like they do at Kinnick Stadium. But yeah, I think, the press box feels like a million miles. It doesn't even, I've never been up in the press box, honestly. But yeah, I think they definitely probably need to do a renovation there. If they do how many seats would they lose? Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, of course, those wouldn't.
They'd have to use them more than every other year, Jim, so it's not a big deal.
Well, yeah, there you go. God. Well, NDSU fans usually, I don't think Bison fans traveled that well there last year, to be honest with you.
No, they only had like 6,000 for that game, and it was like almost 50-50 split.
And frankly, USD almost beat them last year, too. Down there, they were up at half, and then just NDSU. I was going to say the rest of the Valley as we get ready to wrap up here. Rest of the Valley. And this was the shocker. And I've had a few people saying USC could lose the next 2 out of their next 3. North Dakota went to overtime to beat Indiana State. Come on.
If it was in the Alaris, I would put some stock into that, but they're not going to lose in the Dakota Dome.
I think UND's got like 1 or 2 road wins since they joined the Valley. It's just they are such a different. And it wasn't just last week. I mean, you could see a letdown coming after such an emotional win over NDSU. But they always are just night and day different at home. So, I mean, unless something – now, I will say this was interesting at the end of the thing. USD did not make their players available for the press conference.
I noticed that.
That what we were initially told, because as is typical, the winning team goes first. We had SDSU players. We had Jimmy Rogers. We were initially told I think we were going to get Bauman and Mogensen. Bob comes in. Obviously, he's not happy. It wasn't. I wouldn't say he was in a bad mood, but he's certainly disappointed. But and then we were told the players weren't coming. So, make of that what you will. Obviously, it's not something I've known them to do before. They had their players available last year after they got caned in Brookings, and I think Carson Camp still can't. I think I'm gonna have to double check. I'm pretty sure they were still out last year. I wasn't up. I didn't attend the press conference last year because I had a live shot. For the news, because I think that was a 2:00 start last year and had a live shot in our 6. But yeah, that's a little unusual. So, well, we'll see what happens. They have a tough game, like we said. SIU, again, this is very similar to NDSU. Don't make much out of this. They beat Western Illinois 63-0.
I had a bet with someone the other day about which will end first, Western's losing streak or the Jacks winning streak. Because I think the Jacks are 21 now, and Western's. So I know Western's 2 ahead. So Western is 23 consecutive losses now.
Yeah, I would put I would bet on Western's. You said which one goes first? Which
Yep.
streak ends? I would say at this point, man, that's tough because
It's basically you're asking because I think Western will win a couple games in the OVC next year. It's what does SDSU's playoff run look like, and what does Oklahoma State look like next year? If you
that could be
think
the
they
big
make it to
one
the playoffs,
because Western obviously they might win in the OVC, but they're gonna like you said, it could be Oklahoma State where SDSU lose. But I mean, yeah, I guess you count F's. Yeah, I mean, either way, yeah. I think Western's obviously probably going to start with an FBS team next year as well. So they're losing streaks likely to continue regardless until they at least get to OVC play. But yeah, and then yeah, they're just God. I don't even. I'm a little surprised their football program's even continuing. I've kind of thought it would just be they just say, well, we had fun, but let's cut this thing and cut our losses and save some money and maybe just keep trying to build up our basketball program, get them out of that ridiculous assembly hall or renovate it. I mean, that place is a dump.
interesting response to Jim's comment here. I don't know if anyone else is familiar how this game came about, but this is from the 2 canceled Nebraska games that they moved to 28 and 30 as part of not having to buy those games out. Nebraska agreed to help us find an FBS opponent for 24. So I don't think Oklahoma State would. They'd have no reason to, but I don't think they could even if they wanted to.
Yeah, I think it's a little close, right? I mean, unless they got like some big time FBS game, like unless Alabama says, "Hey, we want to play you on this week," and if that happens, then they would have to cut STSU a really large check. Like it would be double the size of whatever they're paying STSU, and I think they're paying STSU like $600,000, something like that.
Usually, an FCS FBS game, the FCS team gets 200 to 400, depending on the school and everything. So.
And
then
remember,
obviously there'd be some penalties in there as well.
Well, remember they got their sugar daddy T Boone Pickens running that show, so he tends to fork out a little more. But yeah, I mean it's pretty. Although it kind of happened last year, I remember with USD because they were supposed to go to Missouri last year, and then Missouri had somebody, so they flipped in K-State, and then they went to Missouri this year. But yeah, it's more. I don't think Oklahoma State's going to buy that game out. Yeah, but you never know. Nothing new under the sun. I'll ask this question with Terry before we wrap up with the rest of the Valley and the FCS. Is USD Mirage? I'm not going to say that yet. I mean, again, we kind of answered this a little earlier. As I've said, with the whole, are they a top 10 team? Well, who really is a top 10 team outside of SDSU and Montana State and maybe Idaho and Montana? I think the rest of the subdivision is not that good. Obviously, it's SDSU and everybody else. I mean, look, NDSU is not great. This is not just because this isn't the dominant NDSU team. Winning in the Fargo Dome is better than about every other. What, you want to go to the Southern Conference and tell me whoever wins it? And again, I don't even know half these teams off the top of my head. There's unless you're in the Big Sky or the Valley, most of these conferences only have one, maybe two good teams. It's not the gauntlet you go through. Winning on the road in the Valley is better than about 90% of these other conferences get. So and they went wire to wire in the Fargo Dome. It's not like what happened a couple of years earlier in 2015 when they made that comeback after Carson Wentz hurt his hand. That was a wire to wire win. They beat a Youngstown team, which has been good. Youngstown won again today and is 5-3. So I'm not ready to say they're a mirage. Are they really a top 10 team? We'll see. I mean, I think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be at worst 8-3. If they win next week, then they absolutely should finish 9-2 and be a seed. Now, next week's going to be a challenge because they got to go to Southern Illinois, and that to me is almost a playoff game in and of itself because the winner of that is going to have inside track to get a seed. Southern Illinois, they also got to go to North Dakota. Now, here's the thing about NDSU. There is no guarantee they're getting in the playoffs. I'm just saying that right now because they got, let's assume they lose to the Jacks next week. They got to close with SIU at home. That's not easy. I mean, I know it, but we've seen, hey, We saw USD go down there and win. Then they got to go to Northern Iowa, and they always struggle. I mean, we saw how tough that was for the Jacks last year.
That could be a playing game too. Just looking at UNI's schedule.
But if they're 7-4, or well, certainly if they're now if they lost all 3 of those games and they're 6-5, they're not getting in.
UNI did, but it'll depend. There's a lot of teams that are going to be that record.
But I'm saying
got in a couple years ago at 6-5. No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But if NDSU's 7-4, who's their winner?
They're in. They beat Central Arkansas, who's probably a top 15 team, gonna win the UAC. Maybe, they were a top 10 kind of fringe team for a lot of people till they lost to Tarleton in a close game today.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I'll tell you this, though. I don't know if they're hosting. Because, and I'll be honest with you, too. Even
it's
if they,
still
I don't
the bid. It's bids for one more year, so they will be hosting.
Well, but the other half of it is, I don't know how many people in Fargo are going to want to go to that playoff game either.
Well, they'll eat the check.
Yeah, that might be that will be the lowest attended playoff game in Bison history. If they, I don't know, they will be if they do lose 2 out of 3. I mean, again, we were assuming they're going to lose to the Jacks. That's just, I think, it's a fairly safe assumption. If they're 7-4, I think they're more of a bubble team than we realize. But on name recognition, and again, Central Arkansas, like you said, it stacks as a good win right now. But man, their resume will be pretty thin if they were to lose to SDSU and SIU. I mean, they don't really, when your biggest win is a non-conference win and you don't really have a signature win in the Valley, that's not a great resume. That's not a great resume to me when your signature win in the Valley is maybe a UNI team that's got 6 wins or 7 wins. That's always kind of perpetually on the cut line. But I mean, depending on what happens and depending on how beat up the Bison are getting, 6-5 is not out of the realm of possibility for NDSU. It seems hard to believe, and I kind of tend to think they'll probably find a way to rise up and find a way to beat SIU in the Dome. But man, we'll see what happens next week in Brookings. But like that, I guess to wrap up the rest of that Valley chat too. I have to pull up my board again because it kind of temporarily fritzed out on me. Northern Iowa escaped 24-21. They're now 5-3. That's probably going to knock Illinois State, I think, out. They're 4-4. I don't think they're going to. They
got to win out, and I don't know what their schedule looks like.
And I don't know that they're really going to have any enough quality wins on there to honestly, even if they did finish 7-4, there's gonna be a log jam of 7-win teams potentially. So
they end with UND, so that could be a playing game. I think Illinois State's better than they're probably going to get credit for. They've just kind of had a meat grinder of a schedule.
And Youngstown beat Missouri State 44-28, so they're 5-3. Of course, that's who the Jacks will see the week after NDSU. Deceptively, maybe I don't want to say trap game or difficult game. It'll be the final road game, but the Ice Castle can be a little bit of a tough place to play, especially in the winter.
They've got a good offense. Their defense looked better because I don't want to take anything away. If you listen to our Wednesday show, I've kind of been pounding that drum. Missouri State is a good passing team, and that's been Youngstown's weakness. So they gave up some yards today, but not a lot of points. So that was improvement out of Youngstown there today.
And, of course, the other big score in the at least one of my crazy predictions kind of came true this week was that Idaho would have a pretty good shot to knock off MSU. And I think Montana State has some kicking issues maybe to look at, but
kicking issues, and they also decided not to show up till the middle of the second quarter. Didn't help any. And then I don't know. We were talking about this kind of offline, me and some of the guys were this week, is I think they are so stuck on Tommy Mellott because he saved the 2021 season when you're starting quarterback transfers right before the playoffs as a freshman. He's a Butte, Montana, touchdown Tommy. The legend of Tommy, and don't get me wrong, Tommy Mellott is an outstanding football player. But the legend of Tommy is almost bigger than Tommy Mellott himself is. And From what I've seen, I've watched quite a bit of their games this year. I think Sean Chambers is a better football player and quarterback.
Was he hurt? Was Chambers hurt today?
No, we were talking about that. They had him throw it twice. He didn't connect on either of them, and he had like 3 carries. He just didn't use them today.
I was gonna say on the box score, it doesn't list Chambers as throwing. It only shows him running.
Maybe they were erased the penalty or something, but yeah, they just didn't play him. You're muted, Zach.
Here we go. My clicker's not working quite right. Because I try to get that. I get that feedback a lot when I'm not muted. If somebody else, if
Sure.
I don't have the best mic, I admit to that, folks. Yeah, I worked in Montana briefly for about a half a year a while back. It's been a little while, but people don't understand. It's a little different from South Dakota. I mean, obviously we know how big that rivalry is out there. It really is a 365 day a year thing out there, and but for whatever reason, I think because maybe they're a little more I don't want to say they're isolated, but they kind of are. I mean, you look out here. I mean, even when I do our Football Friday shows for high school, we've got Iowa. We're close to Iowa. We're close to Minnesota. We got Nebraska. It's like we're not really on an island here. We've got like SDSU and USD. They recruit all over the place out here. Montana, they really do rely a lot on their in-state recruits. It's not. I mean, they not to say they don't go everywhere else too. I mean, it's a D1 program, but those in-state kids. I mean, they really take. Not only are they like. Is it more key there? It's the lifeblood. And the people take a lot of pride in that thing. And Butte, for them to have a Montana born and bred starting quarterback who took them to the championship, I think they value that more at times than apparently the fact that I think Chambers is. I agree. I think Chambers is better. Malott, you can't knock what he did a couple of years ago. I think if he had not gotten hurt in a very similar fashion to what we saw happen with Gronowski, I don't know if they beat NDSU in that title game, but if they compete with them.
Yeah, it's a better game for sure.
But I look at Chambers, and especially if they're going to run, I've talked about this with Brendan a lot. If they're going to run this quarter, it's kind of the old school NDSU offense that we saw with Brock Jensen a little more, and they kind of started to peel away from it as they got more pro-style guys, but they still now they're kind of getting back to it now that Cam Miller is not really a pro-style guy. But if they're going to run this heavy quarterback run thing, man, you need a guy who can take the punishment. And Chambers, although I know he got hurt at the SDSU game, but I think it's just because he got rolled up on. He's a tank.
Oh, he's way bigger than Malott. I mean, it's not close.
And the one knock I had on him was, well, I don't know if he can throw the football. And when we saw him initially in that SDSU game, it's like he threw a really bad pick. I'm like, oh, I guess that's why they don't throw him. But then when they needed him to pass with the game on the line,
drill, he moved him down the field halfway decent.
And I mean, the guy initially was started out going to Wyoming, so he was a FBS recruit. Not that always means a ton. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to see them peel that back. I mean, Tommy today, and can't really say that it was every. I mean, he was 12 of 24, 191, 2 touchdowns. Only ran for 20. I mean, but Chambers today.
Tommy started out 0 for 8 too, so he was efficient in the second half, but he started out bad.
I'm just wondering if there might have been an injury. If there's not an injury, I'm wondering if there's maybe some dissension. I mean, again, I don't know. I'm not following their message boards. I couldn't really watch this game again. I was a little busy on the sideline, but 3 carries, 7 yards, no official pass. That either he's a little banged up and they just didn't want to play him that much, or there might be something else going on, because it makes no sense to have him, especially in a game you end up losing, in a game where you're, like you said, they didn't even really show up for a half. Yeah, I can't figure out. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to, we'll see. I mean, obviously, I don't think they'll drop too far in the rankings. I know somebody asked me how far USD will drop. I would expect I didn't think they would drop too far unless they got their doors blown off, which they did. So I'd say maybe they go down to 9 or 10. Maybe that's a little far. I'd say maybe they're still about 9. That seems to be the number I'm thinking. But
Western Carolina and Central Arkansas lost today, so that'll help buoy them
yeah,
a little bit. They'll be in
I mean,
that.
obviously, we know the coaches poll seems to kind of be going on their own thing, so the coaches poll might kick them out altogether at this rate. But I wouldn't pay too much attention to the coaches poll. But yeah, so well, it's about after midnight. Well, after midnight now, so I think we should call it probably a night here. But yeah, thanks for bigger surprise. Cats are. I'll stick with the Cats a little bit just because they didn't. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I guess I'm not. No, I'm not really surprised that SDSU team has kind of done this all along.
I didn't think it was going to be as close as some people. I get people are trying to build hype for the game. I thought Jacks were going to win by probably 2-3 scores. I didn't think it would be like this. Jason Eck, I know the Montana game did not go well for Idaho, but he gets his team up for big games. So I was not completely shocked to see Idaho win, I guess, personally.
Well, and they were also coming off a bye, which helped them as well. I think, again, with USD, I kind of thought, well, again, matched up okay with NDSU, who, again, is not NDSU of old, but still, that has to count for something. And, again, every game in the Dakota Dome had been close into the fourth quarter. My thought was that, I didn't make an official prediction. My thought was it probably is close in the fourth, and then SDSU probably just wears them down, gets a touchdown or two, wins by like 14 points, something like that. That 30-17 score I was kind of kicking around in my head was kind of what I envisioned, something like that. But yeah, this was dominant from basically second quarter on. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what the playoff committee release has. I'm sure
they're not doing another one, so that was a one-time thing.
I thought they were going to do another couple, actually, like maybe another one in 2 weeks. Or
I could be wrong, but I could have swore there was some hoopla over that because they were just. I mean, the one they released was good, but we knew at the time. But they were going to do one, and that was just kind of here you go.
I thought they might do one more snapshot one, but
I'll have to look that up.
Let's see. Well, I thought they were all right. I mean, but again, it's all kind of. It is somewhat irrelevant because it was just a snapshot of this moment in time. Right. Doesn't mean that's how they're going to go in a couple of weeks when a lot will change. But I mean, if you're an SDSU fan, unless they lose, and even if they do, I don't know how far they would drop unless, and they would have to they'd have to lose just about everybody and start. Once this whole team comes down with food poisoning and starts losing 2 or 3 games, I don't know how they're going to drop that far.
Answer your question quick, Jim, before we move on and/or wrap up. 17.5. So the model didn't think it was close, but it didn't think it was going to go like this.
Well, I think that will definitely probably do it for this edition of the Jackrabbit postgame show. Be sure to check out Jackrabbit Illustrated all week long. You guys will have one rivalry game to another for SDSU, and
third year in a row. Thanks, Valley Scheduling.
Definitely a little weird that this is the one that's not the. Well, I guess maybe it could be top 10. I don't know if the Bison might creep back in this week and we can continue that streak of, what is it, like now 6-7 years in a row? It's been a top 10 matchup between the two teams. I don't know. Maybe they creep back in. I don't know I don't know how that'll stand. Like you said, there's been a lot of upsets today, but a little weird nonetheless that it's not quite going to have the same level of hype. And we're going into this thing feeling like SDSU is the overwhelming favorite. But as Mr. Yankee said, they will not be overlooking NDSU, and I think they would relish the chance to put the kind of beating on NDSU that they just put on USD, or maybe even a little more, if given the opportunity. So you guys will have good coverage at Jackrabbit Illustrated. Please tune into Dakota News Now. We're going to have a lot of stuff. I'll be putting all our highlights online here shortly, and it'll be up on our website and YouTube as well. A lot of good stuff there. Have a great week, and thanks again for filling in, Alex, and we'll talk to you next week after the marker. Take care.
Sounds good. Thanks as always, Zach. See you, folks. Thanks for tuning in.